My name's Kieran Lyons. You can always call me Kieran, uh, and you can call me Dr. Lyons. Either one works for me. My educational background is actually pretty varied. I went to college. I went to Rice University. I thought I was going to be a physicist, so I actually did do all the math things. I studied for the math section of the SAT, did pretty well, and then decided instead to get a bachelor's degree with so it's two majors, one degree in cognitive sciences, which is essentially how the brain works in a wide variety of ways. And I focused within that on cognitive psychology um, instead of linguistics or instead of philosophy. And I also got a major in studio art where I would draw. In both of those, I focused on really the importance of text, of writing. A lot of my art was sort of writing based, strangely enough, and a lot of my interest in cognitive sciences was based on how reading and writing can change the brain and basically how we can use it as a tool. So I think I ended up somewhere reasonable when I got my master's in fine arts in creative writing with a focus on fiction writing from the University of Mississippi. Right after that, I was teaching that whole time, teaching English while getting my MFA, both literature and language and writing. And then this last year, I earned my Ph.D. in English from Louisiana State University. And what I focused on was actually representations of the environment and animals in global contemporary fiction. But of course, that means that I read very widely. And this whole time, I was teaching both literature at the college level and maybe most relevant, I was teaching freshman composition classes a lot. So that's essentially equivalent to AP language. And some of the other stuff I was teaching was more equivalent to AP literature. And there's a lot of overlap between the skills required for those, especially AP language and the SAT. So at To the Top, so I actually am full-time member of the To the Top team. I'm the director of education programs, which means a whole lot of things. It means I am the English instructor for high school and college level. I teach AP classes, obviously not actually through a school, but I teach them in partnership with high schools and directly to students and in workshops. Also, that means the SAT, standardized tests, basically anything related to reading and writing skills, whether that's from standardized tests all the way to just people wanting to improve, say, their creative writing. Related to that, I'm the senior essay advisor for people applying to college or to grad school. That's actually not just me reading and making sure you made no mistakes. It's actually me working with people over a period of months, sometimes even maybe 6 months, as they're putting together their materials to apply to college. And I'm also just a college counselor. In addition to a variety of other things like hiring tutors, finding tutors for people in other disciplines, finding subject matter experts, all kinds of stuff like that. So pretty broad, but I work on essentially the teaching side of To the Top. So just an overview of the SAT. I know Mr. Liu mentioned some of this, that the math section is 80 minutes. So I'm dealing with the other half. We've called SAT verbal. The strictly speaking term for that section, the English section, is evidence-based reading and writing. Or most of that portion is the reading section, which is 65 minutes and 52 questions over, I think it's 6 passages that are always, they're predictable what they will be. And they're a wide variety from science-based to more nonfiction writing, essay style, or articles. So they basically test your ability to understand a passage and understand how the author of that passage or that chart or that information is attempting to communicate their message and attempting to be persuasive in the way they're doing that. So 52 questions in 65 minutes, that's, you get quite a bit of time there. The writing and language section is only 35 minutes with 44 questions. So these ones are actually, there's a very different type of time management that goes into those two things. The writing and language section is you're essentially asked to help fix a kind of a student writing. It's although it doesn't include any actual writing, it's all multiple choice. It's just it tests you on the skills that you use when you're actually writing and revising. So that's everything from your understanding of grammar and your understanding of catching errors to your ability to make decisions in order to make your writing most effective, most clear and effective given your particular goals. All right, so what is part of the boot camp? It's a pretty simple layout. So we have 8 sessions of 2 hours each for a total of 16 hours, if my math is still correct, and beginning and ending with a diagnostic test. The idea being the test will, which is an official practice exam of this section, will tell you what knowledge you need to build up, and primarily what kind of errors you tend to make and what kind of errors you don't tend to make. The second one, the end, is aimed at, well, showing you how much you've improved, and you almost certainly will have improved a great deal. But the idea is that it also leaves you with greater understanding of where you might on your own continue to improve and practice. In between, we will have lessons that involve practice that go over a variety of questions. The questions ranging from what are our goals with this, and that will really vary depending on who's in the boot camp, how well they're doing, and what happens with the first diagnostic test. Then today we're going to have a little piece of why do students get questions wrong? And like Mr. Liu was saying, sometimes it is a lack of knowledge. Sometimes you might get truly unlucky and there's a vocabulary term in a question. You truly do not know that word, and part of the meeting hinges on that. But more often when people get questions wrong, it's not because of a lack of actual understanding or knowledge. It's because of more psychological factors or a lack of the sort of strategic or tactical know-how about how the SAT works and what is a right answer and what are they actually asking you. Then we will cover the reading and the writing sections and what they entail. It is worth building back up your knowledge and say, especially for the writing section, on the kind of questions you'll be asked about grammar, the kind of mistakes you'll be shown and asked to notice. And then for reading section, I'm not going to make you read a bunch of vocabulary terms or anything. The SAT doesn't work like that anymore, though it was notorious for that in the past. But there may be some knowledge that you specifically could use. But most of these are going to be much more about strategy than about content. I would say all of you have the 90+% of the knowledge you need. It's really what it comes down to is how you approach the questions. And then finally, we'll cover more kind of esoteric topics like how do you guess? And as you might notice, some of this stuff will actually be useful from in the math section. And some of the stuff that Mr. Liu covers in the math section, some of those strategies can actually be applied pretty well to the reading and writing section. I really appreciate that he was showing you how much math you don't have to do if you just understand what you're being asked. And that's kind of similar in the reading and writing part. You are very rarely backed into a situation where you have to have a very specific piece of knowledge. And if you don't have it, you can't get the question right. You can almost always deduce what the actual question or what the best answer is. And if you don't, there are ways to guess or to get at it that are better or worse than others. So that's the outline. These are spaced pretty evenly across the 16 hours. So I want to talk a little bit about what To the Top offers in general. I think this SAT bootcamp and this double presentation here is kind of representative of some stuff that we do. But we do everything from college counseling to professional development. There's almost anything from middle school to when you go to graduate school, if you do. There's very little that we can't help people with or that we don't have experts who could help you with. So that's college counseling. I personally am the person who receives people's essays, helps them coach coach them from nothing, like absolutely no idea what to write, to polished essays for every single school they're applying to. And it is a lot more essays than you might think. It's not one, it's more like 12, 16, maybe more than that, depending how many schools you apply to. Help with prepare for college interviews and interviews related to anything like that. And we also help you find the right schools to apply to in the first place. We do stuff like this, standardized test prep, but not just the SAT. We also do the ACT, and I'm currently involved in, and we will be offering AP classes with Ph.D. candidates and Ph.D. graduates like myself, who are subject matter experts on AP classes. So people who have taught at the college level, teaching these college level AP classes to supplement or to prepare you for or to review the actual ones you're taking in school. Or if you're skipping the class and going straight to the exam, it might also be possible for us to help you with that. Group and individual tutoring, everything from I meet with one person twice a week to help them prepare intensively, say for the SAT, like I am doing right now with some people, all the way up to group sessions. And then everything with academic and professional development, from finding mentors in whatever field you think you might want to go into, whatever major you might want, whatever school you're looking into. We have a wide network of people we can find. We have an advanced planning program where essentially from the end of middle school through high school, we help check in, make sure you're on the right track academically, that you're adding to your resume, not just putting together a nice looking resume. We help people find scholarships. We help people find summer programs. We help with pretty much anything you can think of. So if you're interested in any of that beyond what we're talking about today, beyond the SAT bootcamp, you can always get in touch with us, and that information will be at the end. Today. So this is not exactly what we're going to talk about in the actual bootcamp. This is a little bit of a supplement, although I think this will give a good sense of what kind of topics and what kind of approach we will take during the SAT bootcamp. This will not really depend. I'll be taking questions out of context and talking truly about strategy. And I think a lot of these strategies will actually work for the math section as well, because you got the same brain, you're using the same brain. That two halves of the brain thing is not it's not totally true unless you have some sort of medical condition. You're taking the same brain to the math section as you are to the reading and writing section. But I'd like to cover four common, not necessarily say the four most common, but four very common mistakes students make when they're approaching the reading and writing section of the SAT, and truly in any section of any standardized test, but particularly tailored to the SAT. And these four mistakes are answering the wrong question, going with your gut, running for the lifeboats, and playing by the quote unquote rules. So I'll show you what that is in a moment. So answering the wrong question. So the test, I would say particularly the reading and writing portion of the exam, is designed to lead you to a wrong answer if you aren't accurately assessing the question you are meant to answer. There's a variety of ways this can happen, but usually, or always, I would say, more than one of the potential answer options seems plausible. And often the College Board will actually determine where you might have misinterpreted or where you might have gone wrong or skipped something in the question and what that might lead you to. And then they will conveniently, well, inconveniently for you, provide you with an answer that matches that. So you will be able to confidently choose the wrong answer if you are answering the question the wrong way. So for the example here, I just took a short part of Martin Luther King Jr.'s "I Have a Dream" speech. The real passages on the exam are generally much longer than this, but I've just chosen a small portion for our example. So before I even read this, just the question is, the author uses the image of people sitting down together at a table. That's in paragraph 1, most likely to blank. And that is exactly the format of a type of question you will see, though it wouldn't say paragraph 1, it would actually be line number. So I'll read the passage. While I'm reading it, in your mind, don't put it in the chat and don't necessarily say it out loud, but I'd like you to try to determine what you think the right answer is. So I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. Okay, so I'm just going to walk through how you might, how someone, well, not a full walkthrough, but a little bit of a walkthrough about how someone might approach this, essentially in the wrong way. So the question is, the author uses the image of people sitting down together at a table. You can see that on the left-hand side there. I can bust out my laser pointer. Most likely to whatever. Is it A, suggest that voting rights for African Americans are an important goal? Is it B, present a hopeful picture of the future of Mississippi? Is it C, explain why the author wants a better future for his children? Or D, illustrate the author's hope that Black and white Southerners will achieve equality? This is a very easy question to get wrong if you don't approach it strategically. I don't think it's necessarily a very hard question. And maybe you've gotten the correct answer, D, on your own already. However, A, B, and C, and D are all true statements. Martin Luther King does want to suggest that voting rights for African Americans are an important goal. He does present a hopeful picture of the future of Mississippi. And he does explain, or at least address, the topic of wanting a better future for his children. But the only one of these that is actually illustrated by the image of people sitting down together at a table in paragraph 1 is D. So you end up with situations like this at all, where if you choose the true statement, you will get the wrong answer because you will not be matching it to the correct question or the question correctly. B has to do with paragraph 2, C has to do with paragraph 3, and A is true, but it's not in here at all. And it's actually in a different part of the passage that's not quoted at all. So I'll return to the idea of answering the wrong question a little bit, but I think each of these mistakes people make are similar to each other. So I think going with your gut, unless you have literally nothing else to go on but your hunch, is wrong. And I've had plenty of students and plenty of people I've worked with who primarily rely on this as their strategy. They go with the answer they think seems the most right. Maybe they go check to see if it continues seeming right, and then they choose it. And maybe they get the question right 75% of the time. But you don't want to get 75% of the time. You want to only get a question wrong when you know you don't know and you've guessed and you've eliminated, and maybe you're flipping a coin. But 75% of the time isn't great if you're well prepared. So and the reason going with your gut is a problem is because the correct answer usually comes down to details. As with the previous one, often there's a plausible reason why you might choose each of the other answers, especially if you're thinking very broadly. You say, oh, that seems true. That reminds me of what I read. Some of those words are right, because a 90% correct answer is 100% wrong on the exam. Only one of the potential answers is 100% right, and that's every single word is correct, and every single word matches every single word of the question itself. So for here, I'll read this quickly. This is the first paragraph of a real passage from a practice exam. And so this is more or less the first 150 words of an 850 word passage, so quite long. On the real exam, you would have read this. At this point, you might not really know what's going on in the passage, and then you'll keep going, right? And then you'll get to the question 1, and it's about the beginning, which you read several minutes ago and hundreds of words ago. So you might not really remember what happened. So I'll read it out loud, and then I'll talk about what you might do. So another man might have thrown up his hands, but not Nawabdeen. His 12 daughters acted as a spur to his genius, and he looked with satisfaction in the mirror each morning at the face of a warrior going out to do battle. Nawab, of course, knew that he must proliferate his sources of revenue. The salary he received from K.K. Haruni for tending the tube wells would not even begin to suffice. He set up a little one-room flour mill, run off a condemned electric motor, condemned by him. He tried his hand at fish farming in a little pond at the edge of his master's fields. He bought broken radios, fixed them, and resold them. He did not demur even when asked to fix watches, though that enterprise did spectacularly badly, and in fact earned him more kicks than kudos, for no watch he took apart ever kept time again. Kind of hard to catch what it means on first read, especially if you've read a whole lot more and don't really remember it. Then you get back to the first question and it says, the main purpose of the first paragraph is to blank. One of the tricks here is whenever the exam says main purpose or best answer or most closely, it makes you feel like it's a judgment call. It's never a judgment call. Only one of them is right. They're all the other answers are wrong. Not just not as good, but so clearly not as good or so clearly not appropriate that they're wrong. But what you might do is you might think, okay, I remember it saying he was something about his daughters. So does it characterize him as a caring father? And what you might do is be like, okay, I think A sounds reasonable. I'll go look at it and see if I can if that seems right. No. His 12 daughters acted as a spur to his genius, and he looked with satisfaction in the mirror each morning with the face of a warrior going out to do battle. Oh, it sounds like now Nawab is a caring father. He's got 12 daughters, and they lead him to go to work like a warrior. A's right, and you pick A. And A isn't right. Just between us, it's C. But you might do the same thing with B. You might think, oh, it did talk about a typical day, and it talked about a lot of things he did. So maybe that's what this is. It's a schedule of a typical day. You'd look through and you'd see, oh, he looked with satisfaction in the mirror each morning. Oh, yeah, that's it. It's right. It's also wrong. Although it does include something about a typical day, although it does characterize him as a caring father, fully more than half of this passage that you wouldn't have gotten to if you went with your gut describes his various money-making ventures. So if you go with your gut, you're going to get it wrong most of the time. You always want to take the algorithmic approach, the approach that will lead you to the correct answer if you follow the steps of logic, rather than the heuristic approach, which is the rule of thumb that will allow you to guess best. You try one. If you truly cannot get to the right answer, if you hit a wall, only then should you ever go with your gut. And even then, it should be informed by the evidence. Okay, so here I'm not even going to show you the passage because it's not about the passage. Kind of like what Mr. Liu was saying, sometimes you don't need to do the math. Here, what I'm trying to show you, of course, you'd need to read the passage to answer these questions, but the strategy I'm trying to show you, the mistake I'm trying to show you, doesn't rely on it. So let's say you've read a passage and the next two questions are these. The first question is, according to the passage, which expectation do traditional authorities now face? They should blank, they should blank, they should blank, they should blank. This is actually, well, at this point, most students taking the SAT are on some level panicking. If you're well prepared, you will be doing this much less. But even if you are calm, your brain doesn't like thinking very hard. It takes up a lot of energy. It's not fun. It's stressful, and your brain is trying to get you out of that situation as quickly as possible. This is what I mean by running for the lifeboats. So on one level, when you're trying to calmly and soberly and carefully analyze a question and answer it, some part of your brain, there's an alarm going off that is saying, get out of here. We need to get away from this question. It's hurting our brain. It's costing us energy. We got to get to the lifeboat. So you are part of your brain, hopefully it's small, but maybe it's not, is saying, just pick one, pick the one that works. And you might lead you to go with your gut. It might lead you to not really read the question very quickly because you just want the answer. It might create tunnel vision. So what happens here is if you were doing this, you read the passage. The first question is quite challenging, no matter what the passage is, because it isn't a question about the main point, and it doesn't tell you where to look. So there may be anywhere in the passage something about the expectation that traditional authorities now face. Are you going to read the whole thing again to get the answer? Probably not. That would be unreasonable. So unless you're lucky enough to really remember where to look, or lucky enough to glance at it and find the answer, you're not going to be able to choose the answer with any degree of certainty. So you might guess, let's say, C. You remember it said something about public knowledge. So public knowledge seems reasonable. Between us, that's not right. So you answer that, you're like, okay, fine. Your brain's like, oh, thank you. Oh, I got the answer. Let's move on. That was really stressful. Question 2 is, which choice provides the best evidence for the answer to the previous question? And you're horrified. This question depends on the answer to the previous question. And you weren't really sure about that one, and you definitely don't want to think about it again. So what you might do is look at these lines, say, okay, which one works for C? None of them work for C, or they, one of them sort of works for C, and then you pick that. And then I would say that's even worse than choosing at random. If you're not really sure about your first question and you're basing your second one on it, you might as well just get the 25% chance of getting it right. So you get you might, if you're letting your brain run the show, get a chain of answers wrong. And you see this all the time. If you look at someone's tests, you'll see 1, 2 wrong in a row. What a calm student might do, what a well-practiced student might do, what you might do after this is look at this and think, okay, this is an opportunity actually for me to check my answer on number 1, because now I know where the evidence that will lead someone to the answer to question 1 is. And you would actually go through, look at these lines, and realize, no, C is not correct. Actually, I believe D is the correct answer here. But actually, the very best thing you would do is you would never get in that situation in the first place. So students, I think, often make assumptions about how you have to go through the SAT. One of those things, and often those are untrue assumptions. For instance, you do not have to, and for most students, it's probably not a good idea to answer the questions in order. And at the very least, have read through them all beforehand. It's not cheating. It might feel weird, but if you're well organized, you don't read them in order. And you would know, first of all, that these 2 questions are paired together. You would realize that question 1 is really hard to answer as the first question. And you would answer the other questions about the passage first, have a good understanding, maybe even found the answer to 1 while you're doing that. And then you would approach 1 and 2 as paired questions and realize after reading question 1 that you only need to look at these 4 sets of lines to find the correct answer. Other things you might have trouble with is, well, first of all, guessing. You can guess. And it feels wrong to choose multiple answers in a row that are the same. You might think, no way this is also B, and you might second guess yourself, when really B, B, B is just as likely as A, B, C, or something like that. So by learning what really are rules, what really aren't rules, and how to work with the psychology behind how the test is designed and the psychology of how you can approach it, that's how you can get your best results, regardless of your actual knowledge of reading and writing from English or from any other outside source. What that leads to is one thing really interesting, where it might be best just to pick A, B, C, or D before you take the exam. Every time you guess, put the same one, put C. Let's say it's catastrophic. You have 10 questions left in a few minutes. Save yourself 10 seconds to put C for all 10 questions and use the other minute and 50 seconds to try to get 1 more question right the real way, rather than trying to make it look random and spending an extra few seconds that you could really use. So in this bootcamp, we'll talk about strategies that will help immediately by the end of the bootcamp and will pay off over time if you continue practicing them. Our approach, kind of like based on my educational background, is rooted in the psychology of test taking, and this is suitable for both first-time SAT test takers and those hoping to improve their scores.